In this tutorial, we're going to go over the echo action objects settings script. Just open it up and you'll see that you have the secure channel, which you must match with the breed object. You create your own channel for your first breed and any subsequent breeds, such as if you make a line of fish or a line of birds and so on, you would want to have their own channel so you don't have fish that are talking to the birds' nests and so on. This hover text here, you could change the color, and if you wanted to make it blank, just remove the header and footer and leave the others blank as well. These values here allow you to create a custom message that define its breeding ability and its food ability. These are both breeding and food are optional for each action object, but let's say this is a food source. To be able to use this to show how much food is remaining, which you start the levels down here, it would start at 50 units, and the value of the food would be, well, let's just call it 10%. So if they eat 5 units, they get 50% health. Because as we set in the previous tutorial, it was between 5 and 10 food units per sitting. So let's say if they ate 50, it would get 50%. So to define that in the hover text, you would say something along the lines of using these expressions, which are replaced in the script itself to match the global values and how much are left, and that updates every few seconds, so that when something's eating at it, it shows the value or the value or the levels drop or however you enact this the scenario. So anyway, the food level itself, let's say it's currently value, which would start at 50, so currently 50 food units remaining, right? And this can be in any kind of syntax that you want. If you want another line, you do this test line. That would give it 2 lines, the first one being currently 50 units remaining, and the test line underneath that. And below that, we'll even define the food value, and just to show you the different types of syntax you can use, implanting value, and then since it's a percentage of health that you get, we'll just add that extra percent. Since it's only going to replace this here, don't worry about that extra bit. It's going to now say food value equals 10%. Okay, so when I save that, it will update the hover text that you see right in here. It will say currently 50 food units, the test line, and the food value. Okay, so now that we've done that, let's get into the actual breeding aspect of it all. Res any object means when it's true, it'll res any object that you put in its inventory. So this is helpful if you have no copy breeds, children. If somebody decides to remove that breed from the contents, it won't be activated, it won't be authorized. They actually will have to have the male and female interact based on how you defined it, and set it as an activate, and then from there it will move on throughout its simulation. But this is helpful because if you have a no copy animal, you would want to be able to put maybe 20 breeds in there or whatever. Putting that 20 breeds in there with this set to true, it'll res any of those objects as the children, and it'll put them around the base of the object. And so if it's a nest, it'll put them around the nest. You can define how far away it will res these breeds. If it's a large object, or if it's something small, you might want to res a bunch of eggs within a nest. This is within meters. So this is a ½ meter away. So at this rate, it'll res them around the object, a ½ of a meter away from its center. The breed res max means the number of children to breed. If this nest can only res 5, then put 5. -1 indicates that's an infinite amount of children. But also you can set it so only one family can use this nest, so one breeding pair can only use this nest. With this being true and this being infinite, the breed objects themselves are limited to how many breeds they can produce, how many children they can produce in their lifetime. So if a breed object's only able to produce 10 children in its lifetime based on how you set it, it will only breed those 10, or however many you put in the object. Getting back to this, if you do set it as false, set this as its name. This is helpful in case you want to have other objects besides breedables that will res from the nest or whatever you would like to call it, but still resing the actual object itself. The breedable objects can be set as copyable, and you just set the scripts inside them as no copy. When they're first resed and taken back into the contents, they will be no copyable. That's just a tip there in case you wanted to make just one breedable to insert into the contents, label it, use other resibles, and still maintain the no copy permissions. So moving on, then we also have the breed maxed die. The object will die, meaning it will be destroyed, it will be removed from the grid once the maximum children have been created, which my OCD just realized I didn't finish my sentence. So now moving along, the similar setting for food is when it's empty, also for it to die. Setting this to true, just like you would set this to true, the action object will die after the food level reaches 0. This is helpful if it's a one-time use food source. Otherwise, if it's refillable, you could leave it false, or if it's just something you want to leave out so that the owner can see that it is in fact empty, and to replace it, to also go ahead and you can leave that as false. Like I hinted to earlier, you have the food level and food unit value. You can set this to any number, 0 if you don't want this to be a food object, -1 if you want it to be a consistently an infinite food source, and perhaps you would only want it to provide minimum nutrition. So it will have infinite, and it will replace, instead of saying -1, it will say unlimited as the value. And you will see here, as I replace that and save the scripts, it'll say currently unlimited food limit units remaining, and the value is now 1%. Okay. Now down here is where we're going to get into in the next tutorial, is how you define the interactions and actions that the behaviors of your eco breed itself. Okay. At this point right now, it just says hello eco when it first interacts with this object, when it's resed for the first time, or when this is first resed for the first time. So if you already had a breed and it's wandering around, and you res the food unit, food source for the first time, it has a start event that you can trigger a certain number of methods for. But as you can see, changing the say, we are able to change what it does. Since it's now first interacting with it, it will say the following. Catch me on the next tutorial for more information on how to set up your action classes.